Johnny Cash was the original punk rocker.
I don't even know 4 chords on the guitar.
It's just raw American rock and roll. It didn't really matter what kind of music he was playing.
Cash had a very unique, story coming from the kind of Memphis side of things.
He just said what he felt. When Cash speaks, you kind of listen, it's an automatic thing.
I Walk the Line is sort of ludicrous for him to sing. He never walked any line.
He's a poet and he's a picker. He's a prophet and he's a pusher. He's a pilgrim and a preacher, and the problem when he's stoned. He's a walking contradiction, partly truth and partly fiction, taking every wrong direction on his lonely way back home.
I keep my eyes wide open all the time. I keep the ends out for the tie that binds. Because you're mine, I walk the line.
From the beginning, music for Johnny Cash offered a chance to rebel. Born and raised in rural Arkansas during the height of the Great Depression, John R. Cash's childhood was spent working with his family in cotton fields by day. But he spent his nights with an ear pressed against the transistor radio to listen to the soft crackle of the latest blues and country hits, songs his father had forbidden. In 1950, he enlisted in the Air Force and served as a Morse code intercept operator for Soviet transmissions in Landsberg, Germany, where he was the first to pick up the news of the death of Joseph Stalin. While serving overseas, music remained a crucial release as he fought back against the buttoned-up military lifestyle by forming his first band and recording their picking sessions. Cash returned to the States in the mid-1950s with a dream to play music for a living. The future man in black found himself drawn to a feisty southern city that was on the verge of changing music forever.
At the beginning, when rock and roll was just getting its start, I think everybody was just looking for a place to throw their gear and make some good music fast.
Memphis was really like a stew. It's a corny analogy, but it's true. It was where a lot of musical styles merged. And there was a freedom in Memphis music.
Memphis, you break records there. Now that's when the record business was fun, You cut a record and have it out in 2 or 3 days.
Memphis itself has its own sound, and everything that came out of Sun with Sam Phillips was so dark and kind of against the grain.
When Cash arrived, Memphis had the freewheeling feel of the Wild West. Anything and everything was possible for a man willing to take a little risk, staking an early claim and upending the status quo by recording blues artists B.B. King and Howlin' Wolf, whose pioneering producer, Sam Phillips.
He would capture the essence of whoever the artist was. He would just decide what it was that was great about this artist and then make the most of it.
There wasn't anything particularly fancy about our approach to sound. It was a pretty simplistic type of approach. We didn't do anything fancy. Just used regular microphones. It was the feeling we got, all that attitude more than anything else.
Jerry Lee, Carl, Elvis even, and John, they still called him Mr. Phillips. All those guys had their visions. And I think the most important thing about Sam as a visionary, he recognized some common spirits and he let them alone. He basically gently guided them the way I feel it.
Inside his Sun studios one early July evening in 1954, Phillips captured an impromptu performance of the blues number, That's All Right Mama, by a young truck driver named Elvis Presley. 3 days later, it was on the radio, and the original rock and roll rebel was born. Johnny Cash, who was making ends meet as a door-to-door salesman, decided it was time to make an impression of his own.
I would have loved to seen Johnny Cash when he walked through those doors the first time, because you don't think of Johnny Cash as being scared ever.
He walks into Sun Studios and really pleads for an opportunity to record for Sam Phillips. And he plays a sort of music that very few have played before.
He never thought of selling records. He never thought of being on tour. What he wanted to do was be on the radio. His great love for music was developed based on the love for gospel music. When he first decided he wanted to play music, when he went to Sam Phillips, it was to sing gospel songs.
I think Sam said something to him like, come back when you sinned a little. And the truth is, Johnny probably was in plenty and would sin plenty more in the years to come, but he knew that Johnny Cash couldn't just be a gospel singer.
Johnny came hat in hand to Sam Phillips' little corner store and recorded, I think, Hey Porter was on one side, and Cry, 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 I think. But the odds against them being released as a record were just so improbable.
Cash would eventually win Sam Phillips over and revved up what would become his signature rockabilly style.
Johnny Cash is a good example of what Sam Phillips, what he did that was different.
Now, a lesser artist, he would have just kicked out the door. But he actually said, no, give me something else. Like, show me something that is uniquely you.
If it wouldn't have been Sam Phillips, they would have listened to Johnny Cash and said, well, he's got a different voice, I'm not sure about that. Sam Phillips' genius was to say, that's what makes you different, that's beautiful.
With his band, the Tennessee Two, guitarist Luther Perkins and bassist Marshall Grant, Cash produced a sound that would jump off the radio dial.
That signature guitar sound with the dollar bill under the fret of the guitar, and Luther Perkins making that amazing sound that really separated Johnny's sound from all the rest.
He had a strange singing style. He had his band sounded weird. He was not a great guitar player.
As a producer, one of the interesting things for me is the kind of, it's not exactly a tic-tac guitar, but it became a signature sound of Johnny. As a producer, was of great interest to me, apart from the fabulous song and not being a formula. That gave it a very distinctive sound.
The Grand Ole Opry of Nashville, the metropolitan of country and western music.
He got to the Opry and said that was the realization of his biggest dream. So while the sound was not in line with everything else that was going on with country, it was Johnny Cash music, discernibly and definitely.
Cash's signature sound was a sign of a radical change on the radio dial. Leading up to the mid-50s, doo-wop and Frank Sinatra topped the charts. But when Bill Haley and the Comets reached #1 with Rock Around the Clock, it opened the floodgates for a new style of music, rock and roll. By 1956, Elvis and fellow Sun Records artist Carl Perkins had a handful of #1 hits on country and Hot 100 charts. Cash found moderate success with his first 3 singles, but he had yet to record that breakout hit that would separate him from the pack. To find it, the man in black would need to tap into the fears and doubts of his darker side.
Johnny was the original, completely messed up. I mean, he really showed everything that was wrong with him and everything that he was trying to do to make it right in his music, in his personal life.
There's always that dark side, there's always that edge, you're kind of always living on the edge. So holding yourself in line is pretty hard, and I think that those guys were always in this moral battle with themselves.
To support his first Sun recording, it was time to start touring. But young Cash quickly realized women flocked to stars like a moth to a flame, a problem for a married man with a conscience.
Women just electrify him. When he'd go on stage at the Ryman Auditorium, he came out on the stage and people, it was like a reaction to Elvis Presley.
The burden of temptation, combined with an unusual take on an old song he recorded while in the Air Force, led Cash write one of his greatest hits.
Let's welcome Johnny Cash to the Tennessee.
He played me this tape that they made in the barracks. It was basically Wildwood Flower, and the tape had got flipped and got turned around, and it became the guitar line almost till I Walked the Line.
I keep a close watch on the heart of mine.
When my father wrote I Walk the Line, he had just begun to go on the road a lot and was traveling quite a bit and playing music on the road. He had, girls screaming in the audience for him every night. I Walk the Line to my dad was a song of dedication to his first wife, Vivian.
They met while Cash was stationed in San Antonio, Texas. Their courtship lasted through his 3-year tour in Germany, but the temptation faced on the road put their marriage to the ultimate test.
It's great when you have a signature song that really applies to you and your life. But I think it really ended up being a great metaphor for his whole life. He walked many lines and he fell off many lines in every direction.
In I Walk the Line, he's apart from his wife, from his beloved. And it's, you know, he sings it, he doesn't sing it as a celebration of love. It's almost like this burden of fidelity. Because you're mine, I walk, you know, it sounds like, you know, something Moses would say.
On April 2nd, 1956, with Presley's Heartbreak Hotel on the verge of selling 1 million copies, Cash stepped into Sun Studios to take his best shot to top it.
I Walk the Line also has these odd modulations. People normally modulate up. You go up a half step or a whole step so you can have a more dramatic whiz-bang at the end of the song and hit some big high note. This thing modulates down a lot of the time.
I keep a close watch on this heart of mine.
Lyrically, it's powerful, but when you hear that record today, you're fixed on the groove and how unique. I mean, there's never been another sound like that.
It's so weird, that song. I mean, he changes keys all over the place and he's doing the
The hum at the beginning of the song served a purpose. It helped Cash find his pitch. The final verse is sung a full octave below the first one. The song is a textbook example of Cash's boom chicka boom, a sound that Tennessee 2 had perfected. He was known to weave a dollar bill between the strings of his guitar because he loved to emulate that snare drum sound.
I think Johnny had a real understanding of the psychology of a song, and I think that song just reveals so much about him.
Walk the Line is a perfect love song for rougher guys, I think, because they're probably not going to come out and tell you that you know, your eyes sparkle like stars and they're going to be your everything forever. It's simply, I'm going to really try to do my best.
More than the sound of I Walk the Line, it's the stark honesty in the message that still connects with fans more than half a century after it was recorded.
Everybody knows that song. We can relate to it because it makes us feel something when we hear it.
For Johnny Cash to come out and essentially between the lines say, I am beset with temptation, but I'm going to do this, and I'm going to tell you publicly that I'm going to do this because that's what this means to me. In my clearest moment, that's really what I want, even though every other moment that might not be what it looks like. And I think that resonates with people, and I think people got that.
I think Johnny Cash liked the sound of I Walk the Line. You know, he's an artist, he's a songwriter, he's also a performer. And I think the I Walk the Line just spoke to him, and you consider the combo that played behind him and the sound of that record.
It sounds so simple. Like, hey, I could write that. I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all the time. I could have wrote that. Yeah, but you didn't. Johnny Cash did.
I Walk the Line is kind of one of those mysterious pieces of music. It drifts in. It's a mysterious piece of business. It's poetry, you know, with a musical vine wrapped around it that I can't quite get a hold of.
Love isn't easy, and love isn't always sweet. Like real commitment isn't always like that. And so the love songs you can really trust and that really take deep root are the ones you feel like someone really said something real here.
As sure as night is dark and day is light.
I Walk the Line entered the charts on June 9th, 1956, where it not only shot to #1, it stayed there for 6 weeks. The Rebel had officially arrived.
I walk the line.
Walk the Line is one of his biggest songs because, you know, he did really, for most of his life, not walk the line. And I think in his heart, I mean, he really, you know, he wanted to, and he wanted to be that guy, and he really tried, and he fell off a lot, but who doesn't?
As his career escalated, the Rebel soon battled new challenges and temptations.
Every career move he made, every personal move he made, seemed to be swimming upstream. What made him that way? I don't know, but he was consistent.
The relentlessness, the rebelliousness, an outlaw mentality. He was always, to me, he's just raw American rock and roll.
You give me cause for love that I can't hide.
I Walk the Line would spend over 43 weeks on the chart and sell over 2 million copies on its way to becoming Cash's first #1 hit. Cash was now on par with his fellow Sun hit makers, and when the boys of Memphis got together to jam, it spawned an unforgettable collaboration.
I want to see Sun Studio with Sam Phillips at the helm in its heyday, and I'd love to see, you know, $1 Million Quartet, all the guys in there making music.
This little record company in Memphis had under the same roof Elvis and Johnny Cash and Jerry Lee Lewis and Carl Perkins.
Carl Perkins was having a recording session, and I came in, and Elvis came in, and Elvis sat at the piano and started singing gospel songs. And Jerry Lee Lewis came in.
Well, nobody was thinking about anybody showing up, but it just totally perchance, the damn cats all blew in.
And all these guys were out in the studio singing songs and talking and all that, so I thought I ought to record it. So I went in and put up 2 or 3 mics out in the studio and put on a reel-to-reel tape and run one after another for a couple of hours.
And I was looking at a picture of the $1 Million Quartet today, and like, he looks so much older than everyone else, because I think the world weighed on his shoulders. I think the pains of his childhood, you know, they were with him.
A poor country boy from Dyess, Arkansas, a sad community of the 30s, it still looked like the 30s. You wonder how anyone would have any creative juices turned on in a place like that. I mean, it's just amazing. There's no cultural input at all.
They were all born during the depths of the Depression. They all grew up poor but proud, and they all radically changed music forever. For Cash, they were kindred spirits.
They really all didn't think that they had a shot. They just did the best they could, wrote the songs they could. I don't think they ever thought they'd be millionaires.
I traveled in a 1954 Plymouth car with the Tennessee 2 and with the amplifier in the trunk and the big bass fiddle in the car. The neck of it came across the front seat between the 2 in the front, and I was in the back seat beside the bass fiddle. Carl Perkins was traveling and pulling a little trailer that kept coming loose every day. One day the trailer came loose and passed us on the highway.
When you were on the road, you were isolated, totally isolated. And there was a camaraderie and a humorous condition that maintains out here on the road. I mean, we say things to each other that no one could decipher but us. There's some wild stories that I'm not going to tell because I don't know if they've been told or not.
Life on the road was an extreme test of endurance. Looking to keep up his energy, Cash, like so many artists of the era, found a little extra edge in a handful of pills.
He was taking more and more amphetamines. He was getting skinnier, you know, and I think his life was getting a little wilder. Things at home with Vivian and his young girls were all at home, and I think that was weighing on him and you know, becoming something he was struggling with.
People don't understand the road. They don't understand living out here and the high that you have to attain in the evening in order to be Johnny Cash.
When someone asked him about why do you take pills to uppers, and he said, because you have to feel great at 8 o'clock every night.
Though Cash was enjoying the camaraderie of his Sun label mates, the gap in royalties would lead to discontentment.
Artists didn't really know how labels worked. I don't think that labels knew how labels worked too much back then, so I think that you were up against a lot of dishonest, you know, dealings and whatnot.
It wasn't too long until Johnny realized that his record deal was pretty crummy. It wasn't too long before they all kind of drifted elsewhere.
It totally surprised me when Cash left Sun Records. I think it all happened because one day Jerry Lee came along. Suddenly he's selling 1 million records and Johnny Cash is only selling 500,000. And one day Cash came by and wanted to talk to Sam. Well, Sam couldn't do it. He's too busy hustling Jerry Lee Lewis records or something. So I think that offended Cash, and I think that's what kind of led to the thing. He felt like he wasn't being fairly treated.
Cash would sign with Columbia Records in 1958. Although one of the label's top stars for almost 3 decades, it was never an easy road for a man who would always struggle to walk the line.
You know, Nashville tends to have these rules that are hard to go by if you have any kind of rebel qualities about you at all. So I definitely think Johnny fell into that category.
There seems to have been, like, he didn't get the memo. He's supposed to sell himself as the perfect pop star. And so on one hand, he's chasing the dream. On the other hand, he's almost biting the hand that feeds him. Perfect rock star, perfect punk star. He's a punk rocker.
To have had a soul like him come into the world and to spread music and thoughts and ideas that were uncontrived and uncontrolled by society or record labels. He was just the perfect American icon.
Thank you very much.